holding his head. There was once a man who had 3 sons. The first son was very handsome and very talented. He could play the fiddle with his feet. The old man was very proud of him, for he figured the boy would make a fortune someday. The second son now was very strong and very wise, and he could recite clever poetry while holding huge weights above his head. Here is a sample of one of his verses.
Out of the blue, a cocktail flew. Do, be do.
As you can imagine, the old man was very proud of him, for he knew the boy, too, would be famous one day. Now, the third son, he was not one bit like his other brothers. He was very silly, and he really didn't want to grow up. When it was sunny, he would stand inside all day humming the national anthem. And when it was raining, he would stand outside in the yard getting his lederhosens all wet. Come in out of the rain, son, his father would say. What for? His son would ask. Just for a while. And the old man would sigh. I'm not sure he will ever grow up or ever amount to a hill of beans. Well, who wants to be a hill of beans, said the son, unless, of course, it's magic beans like Jack and the Beanstalk has. I read about that in a fairy tale once. Anyway, the old man decided it was time for his sons to go out into the world and to make their fortunes. So he gave them each some sour cheese, stale bread, and a cookie, and bid them all farewell. Now the first son, he traveled along the dusty road until he decided to pause by a shady tree for a midday meal. He was about to eat his sour cheese, his stale bread, and a cookie when a funny little man with a long beard and a crooked nose came up to him. I'm very hungry, young man, the old man said. Would you share your meal with me? No, the first son replied. I need this food to keep up my strength so that I can play the fiddle with my feet. A short time later, the second son paused by the tree. And he sat there because he wanted to eat his midday meal too, when the funny little man came up to him. Pardon me, young man, but... No, shouted the second son, I need this food to keep up my strength so that I can hold heavy weights over my head while reciting clever verses. How did you know I was going to ask for food? Asked the old man. Because I read the book, just $19.95 at your local bookstore. Run, don't walk. With that, he ate his food and continued on his way. No sooner was he out of sight than the third son came up to the shade of the old tree.
Okay.
Pardon me, young son, said the funny little man, but I'm very hungry. You are? Good, then you eat this. You mean you'll let me have your sour cheese, stale bread, and cookie? Sure, said the silly boy. I'm not crazy enough to eat that garbage, you know. The funny little man was delighted, and when he finished the meal, he decided he would repay the boy for his kindness. So he gave the boy an axe and instructed him to cut down the old tree. And then he scurried away before the boy could even stop him. Wait, couldn't I have a quarter or a magazine or something like that instead? Shouted the boy. But the funny old man, by now, who knows where he was? So the boy did as he was told, and he chopped down the tree. And the tree promptly fell down, and there at the stump of the tree, to the amazement of the young man, was a beautiful gold said the silly boy. Forgetting that no one was around to hear him. I'm rich! So he tied a string around the golden goose's neck and he skipped off to the village. On his way to the village, he met a wealthy merchant. Well, I see you have a golden goose there, said the merchant to the boy. I'd like to buy one of its golden feathers. How about I give you a nickel? A nickel? Asked the boy, his eyes widening. You think I'm stupid or something? A golden feather is worth more than that, at least 6 cents. Well, the merchant agreed and gave him the money. But then a strange thing happened. When the merchant touched the goose's tail to pluck a feather, his hand stuck tight, and he could not let go. What is going on? The merchant shouted. Well, said the silly boy, this is a fairy tale, don't you see? And strange things happen all the time. With that, they continued on their way, the lad in front, the goose behind, and the merchant stuck behind the goose. They hadn't gone very far when they met a robber who waved his sword and decided, although it was against the law and not something you young readers should ever do, he decided to rob the golden goose. But when the robber grabbed the merchant to pull him away from the goose, his hand stuck tight and the young man went on his way. When they reached the village, the sheriff saw the robber who was stuck to the merchant who was stuck to the goose. So, said the sheriff to the robber, I finally caught up with you, Fingers. You're under arrest. The sheriff grabbed the robber to haul him off to jail, but of course, he also stuck tight, and so it went on until an hour later. No less than 206 people were stuck together behind the boy and his goose by now. And now, as the fourth to the last person in the line remarked, it was quite a sticky situation. The others tried to beat him up for that, but they couldn't because they were all stuck. Now, it just so happened that the king had a beautiful daughter who never, ever laughed. And the king had offered her hand in marriage to anyone who could make her laugh. When the princess looked out the castle window and saw the procession stuck behind the goose, she broke out into gales of laughter, making a sound that would not have been out of place in a stable. However, many felt the princess was more appealing when she was not laughing. But the king had to live up to his promise. You have made my daughter laugh, he said to the silly boy. Therefore, you shall marry her. Well now, said the boy, that's a good idea. But won't the honeymoon suite get just a little bit crowded? Well, the king saw what he meant, and he called the castle's wise man to solve the problem. The wise man, who also had a long beard, which somehow seems to increase one's IQ, said, he could solve the problem. I could make them all let go in just 17 words, he declared, and then he turned to the line of stuck-together men and said, everybody who does not want to spend the rest of their lives in the dungeon, raise their hands. With that, everybody immediately let go of each other and raised their hands. And with that, the silly boy married the princess. And they lived not so happily ever after. You see, there was a reason the princess had